course, Mark Holder is here. He is the Senior Vice President and Global Counsel for Koch Industries, and both are very passionate about coming up with better policy to deal with some of the problems that we heard so eloquently expressed in the previous panels. So we're going to get right to it because we have a lot to talk about. And Mark, I'm going to start with you, which is unusual for you, Cory, right? Wow, talk about politics making strange bedfellows here. And I know this is...
We're not sleeping together.
And I know you are...
I do think a lot of you. You were very handsome here.
Right, no, but you don't necessarily, as you know, Mark, and as you've heard, when you've had these conversations in recent years, you don't often hear Koch Industries and the names Charles and David Koch and automatically think, prison reform. So how did you get involved in this issue? Because I know you've been doing it for 11 or 12 years. And can you explain sort of how you set down this path toward trying to improve the situation?
Absolutely. Good afternoon. So let me just start out personally for me. I grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I may be the first person from Worcester of an Aspen, so that's very exciting. But growing up, I have a working class background, and the best job I ever had before I went to law school, I was a prison guard when I was in college to pay for school. And it gets back to, for me, Brian Stevenson, so I'm sure everybody here knows he's an amazing person. Yeah, unbelievable. He talks about proximity, and you have to be proximate to something for it to matter. And when I was a jail guard, prison corrections officer, I guess is the right term, I became proximate to it because there were a number of kids I grew up with who were in prison, who were incarcerated. And some of them were bad dudes, but a lot of them weren't. They made mistakes, they had drug issues, they were poor, they had no support, they ended up in a cycle. And it's what we're seeing play out here today, again and again. So that always stuck with me. Because it's really there for the grace of God, how I grew up. And I got lucky. There were many times, not that I did anything crazy, I could have got picked up. And someone else did, I didn't. So that always stuck with me. As far as for Koch, it really gets down to Charles Koch and David Koch. And they are classical liberals. And they believe in a limited government, and they believe in expansive individual liberties and the Bill of Rights. And part of their mission, part of their view, part of their goal is to remove obstacles to opportunity for all Americans, but particularly the disadvantaged. So if you believe in the Bill of Rights and helping eliminate obstacles to opportunity for the disadvantaged, there's no better place to be than in the prison. There's prison reform, criminal justice reform movement, because it has the most profound impact on poor people. It sets the cycle of despair, as the earlier panel was talking about, despair and poverty that people can't get out of. And the Bill of Rights obviously speaks to this. 4 of the 10 amendments deal with criminal justice issues. The 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th amendments. So because we believe in the Bill of Rights, and we want to help people improve their lives, particularly the poor, this is why we're involved. We also, last thing, had some brushes with the law, with our company, with environmental issues many, many years ago. And we saw how we were treated. We ended up, our people were exonerated, and it all went away. But it led Charles and others to say, if it's happening to us, what's happening to the small business owner, the average person in the street, as far as over-prosecution, you name it, over-criminalization. So that's why we're involved.
It's interesting, Cory, isn't it, that this is not falling under traditional liberal and conservative lines. You obviously have teamed up with Rand Paul to put the REDEEM Act forward. And we're going to talk about sort of all the different components of that act in a moment. But first, let's talk about you and your personal experience. I mean, you've been living with this issue your entire life as a black man in America. You wrote about it at Stanford. You wrote, I'm 6'3" and black, do I scare you? You lived in some of the poorest sections.
This would reckon was far scarier back when I was playing football for Stanford.
You should have done stand-up last
Sorry.
night. Anyway, you lived in some of the poorest sections of Newark when you were mayor. And I'm just curious how all your life experiences have made you feel and really made you passionate about this issue. Can you describe some of the things that you personally experienced and some of the things you witnessed?
So, for those who don't know, I live in Newark, New Jersey, and since I came out of law school, I moved on to Martin Luther King Boulevard in Newark, which the south end was very challenged.
area and began getting involved in grassroots organizing, eventually got into politics. Then in 2006 became mayor. When we pulled our community together for my transition to being mayor, we did a incredible community forum about the issues we thought were important: economic development, public safety, children and families, and government reform. And the citizens of my city, hundreds and hundreds of them involved, in every one of those transition reports put prison reentry top of the list. Because in urban America, it so penetrates to the core of people's understanding that the criminal justice system is massively broken, and the sharp, jagged edges of it are stabbing into our community, wounding it on a continuous basis. In 1998, when I first was elected city council, it's the youngest person ever elected in my city's municipal history, and I was a lawyer, so I said, let me hold an expungement clinic on then New Jersey's ridiculously narrow expungement laws. And I'll never forget, it was a small room. We didn't do that much advertising, but it was packed full of African American men, standing room only, lines out the door with this just hope that they could possibly get a job. And you would hear real testimonies from the men talking about the ABA has identified over 40,000 collateral consequences for people when they come out of prison that make it impossible for them to emerge out of this caste system. And so guys were telling awful stories about not being able to get a job, not being able to get a Pell Grant, not being able to get a business license, not being able to get a loan, not being able to get a driver's license because of the fines and fees. And so when I reflect on my 15, 20 years in Newark, New Jersey, one of the strongest issues in every aspect of my daily life, if I was to walk through Newark right now with anybody here, you guys would come up to me and say, I need a job, I've got a record, and would tell you real stories. We've created a system that has driven everything we complain about. There's studies now showing that the poverty rate in America would be 20% less if our incarceration levels were similar to what those European countries were. And so for me, it's just an agony that I live with, literally, in my community, to see so many people. And then the agony is even worse for me because when I compare the justice system, and again, I helped run a police department as a mayor, but I compare that to 20 miles away where I grew up, where in 1969 my parents got a white couple that poses them to be the first black family to move in. And so I grew up in a predominantly white affluent area, and the criminal justice system was radically different there. My young friends, my classmates and I did the same stupid stuff that kids in my community now do, experimenting with drugs, shoplifting. Senior cut day, a bunch of my friends couldn't get into the liquor store with their fake IDs, so they broke it open and stole cases of beers. But the margin for error in those communities was radically different than the zero margin for error in our communities. And there's been a lot of talk about prison reform, but please understand that our jails, which have 20 times the admissions than our prisons do, which suck up kids, that put them for weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years, is causing so much more damage to our society than we actually realize. And so I live daily with this sense that when I came to the United States Senate, I came in an unusual way, where Senator Holden passed away, so it was a special election. So I went from being a mayor one day to then being a United States Senator, one day concerned about high rates of violence, poverty, these challenges, and then standing on the Senate floor, the urgency for me to deal with these issues, which are at the core of the unfinished business of our country, is great, and they're very personal. And I just want to say, besides being a very handsome man,
do you want me to leave, Charlie? I'm like a bird.
Yes. First time that's
no, but this is a beautiful thing that's happening, and I think we sell Republicans short, we sell conservatives short, if we just think that they're involved in this issue because of the fiscal issues, which is outrageous. Our bridges, tunnels, roads are crumbling, but from the mid-90s to 2005 or 6, we were building a new prison in this country every 10 days. We were disinvesting in our infrastructure, but hell, we could build prisons like crazy. To say it's just a fiscal issue is wrong. To say it's just a limited government issue is wrong. There's something about, and I know this about Mark because I've had enough personal conversations with him, and Newt Gingrich and Grover Norquist, there's a deep unfairness to this system that I think compels Americans, regardless if you're Republican or Democratic sense. There's a profound unfairness, I think, that's motivating strange coalitions that have emerged that are just incredibly encouraging to me on both sides of the profile.
Let's talk about reform, because I think that people are looking for solutions, obviously, and it does seem as if we have reached a tipping point, that this issue is getting out into the public consciousness in a way that it hasn't previously. And it seems like there are 3 inflection points where you can actually institute change. One is sort of the issue of excessive arrest and sort of the over-criminalization that I know that you're interested in, Mark. And then there's obviously the time spent in prison and what that experience is like, which we heard previously. And then there's the sort of re-entry process. And those seem to be the 3 areas where you both have focused your efforts on. So let's unpack those, if you will, and talk about the excessive arrest. So what can be done about that? And you can maybe also, Mark, you can talk about that, and you can also, Cory, maybe explain how the REDEEM Act is addressing that.
So let me just start. At Koch, we favor comprehensive criminal justice reform. The system is broken in many ways, and if you fix one part of it and not the others, it will remain broken. That last panel did a great discussion about what we need to fix, and we need to look 20 years down the road. But the arrests are driven by the laws in place, right? So the first step needs to be you address the legislation, and we need to make a decision as a society. What are we deciding is criminal? What type of conduct should be criminalized? Personal behavior should, for example, I live in Kansas, and marijuana possession is a felony, as it is at the federal level still. But you drive out here, it's not, it's legal. When I talk to law enforcement, when I talk to legislators, when I talk to staff, whoever it is, they all agree, yeah, no, that's crazy, it's stupid, and we never enforce it, but they do. But why are we doing that? We need to look at the laws that we have on the books. Why are they in place? And from our position, everything we do in the criminal justice system, first, we need to enhance public safety. Second, we need to honor and defend the Bill of Rights. And 3, we need to treat everyone in the system, and this is important, as an individual with dignity and respect. And that means everybody, from the victims to the accused, to the convicted, the incarcerated, law enforcement, and all their families. Because we don't do that now. Everyone's treated one size fits all, and it's a 2-tier system like we heard before. So we need to fix all of that, and what we need to do to stop the flow of arrests, quite frankly, change some of the laws and the policing practices around that. Why are we enforcing drug laws when really it seems like that is not a top priority for us? Why aren't we letting our police officers focus on violent criminals? Why are we having them write tickets to people, that type of thing? Why are we having, in Long Island, loose cigarette taxes being collected by law enforcement? That doesn't make sense. It puts them at risk. We saw the tragic circumstances there with Mr. Gantner. It's not right. And I think that if we fix the first part of it with the laws and what we're trying to do and what the police's role should be, that'll be a good start. So that's the first point, the inflection point. We can go on from there.
We'll talk about the others.
Yeah.
I'm going to let Cory weigh in. So I feel like the Justice Department, Cory, has really been focusing on this. Have they made any progress in terms of minimum mandatory stuff and more uniform laws nationwide?
So I mean, this is such a large issue, and there's so many ways to approach it. And so just even on something as simple as marijuana, I joined with Rand Paul and Kirsten Gillibrand and Senator Flake and some others to just say we've got to stop this madness. We should respect state laws. The states have chosen to make medical marijuana legal. We shouldn't create mothers who have children with Gervais disease and desperately need that CBD, which doesn't even have the intoxicating elements of marijuana in it. We shouldn't criminalize those mothers, take their children away, or make them refugees to states like Colorado. So I just want to go to something he said because it's so important to me about where does this begin. And when I've been invited to speak on criminal justice panels, I just want to say before we even get to policing, when I sat with the head of the FBI, the special agent in charge, my first weekdays or weeks as mayor, as he was going over to me Homeland Security issues, which by the way, build prisons, mandatory minimums, the Bureau of Prisons sucking up so much resources from our federal government. We don't have the resources we should be dealing with Homeland Security and some of the other things. But I remember what he said to me when I said to him after this depressing conversation about violence and guns and things. I said, how do we solve this problem? And the wisdom of this man, he just looked at me across his arms, shook his head, and said, "We don't solve this problem. We're not going to do it. Law enforcement's not going to do it." As Thoreau said, we're just whacking at the branches of evil, but not the root. And so I just want to mention, just because this conversation, I would feel inauthentic if I didn't tell you that before you even get to policing, law enforcement, courts, if we don't start talking about the kind of trauma our children are facing in this country, if we don't start talking about mental health and how we're going to deal with those issues, if we don't start talking about sexual abuse of children, which is far more real in this country than folks realize. You go to prisons and you find out the backgrounds of the people we stick into prison. You'll realize that a lot of the issues that they're dealing with are and the trauma. And the example I give all the time is after the Newtown shootings, I was so grateful that those children had so much counseling, so many people dealing with the mental health impact of them. But I couldn't help feeling, sitting in Newark, New Jersey, that the kids I know who witnessed horrible shootings, who've seen people die on their streets, who've had parents, as Shaka was saying, who've been shot and riddled with bullets, are not having their trauma attended to at all. And hurt people do go on to hurt people. The second aspect of this idea of just policing and our policing practices in our country, and it's not for this panel, but there's incredible innovations going on that are far David Kennedy and the folks that we sat with him on another panel you and I sat on with some people from John Jay College about going about policing neighborhoods in a way that's far more about justice than it is being driven by fear and retribution ideas. So just getting into what you asked, just the common sense stuff. I just want everybody to know we don't need to be inventive as what the solutions are, because there are states in America right now who are far ahead of the federal government in the innovations they are doing. Mark and I would be overjoyed if we could get bills moving in Congress just doing what the state of Georgia did, to have a Republican governor being able to go to black churches and talk about reducing the black male incarceration rate by 20% by doing some of these common sense things like lowering mandatory minimums. Or Mississippi, to what was mentioned earlier, just realizing that when somebody violates probation or parole, status violations, not going out and committing another crime. And I do need to remind people, because I'm not sure the data point was said, about 75% of the people we lock up in our prisons, the overall majority of people we put into jail, are non-violent offenders. Non-violent offenders. But what Mississippi found out was, if they violate a status offense, failing to check in with your probation parole officer, going out of the geography you're supposed to be limited to, the people, we just stick them back in jail for months at a time. Well, which basically means they lose their job, they can't support their family. So just doing simple, basic, common sense things like, hey, we're going to shove you in for the weekend, and then come back out. Do it again, another weekend, and come back out. That's enough of a punishment. They found Mississippi to dramatically reduce their prison population and achieve the ends to what there are. So what many states are doing, innovating in this space, is what we on the federal government should follow. And Katie rightfully sparses the main discussions in Congress right now between front-end reforms, what are we doing at the sentencing level? And please remember, please know, our criminal justice system has changed. I still remember when I first saw this data point, shocked me that I thought, maybe I watched too much TV, but I thought that you get a trial, there's a jury. Forget that. 98% of our criminal convictions in this country are done by plea bargain. They don't go before the jury trial. That's a massive shift from where it was 30 years ago. 98%. So who has the discretion? It's prosecutorial discretion. And I know the prosecutors work with a lot of them, but please understand that a lot of the things we don't want entering into the determinations enters into that period. So taking away these mandatory minimums, which to me should be eliminated on those front-end reforms. Behind the wall, what goes on behind the wall right now, and I'm so happy, Shaka, you said it, other countries call it torture. The international human rights organizations, they may point to other countries, but they point squarely at the United States of America for these practices behind our walls. The majority of suicides in our prisons of kids is done as a result of solitary confinement. It is one of the most barbaric things that goes on routinely in our country that so damages children and young men. And by the way, 19, 20, your brain is still developing. Putting these kids back on the seats after those experiences with no support, no counseling, you're expecting a different outcome? Come on. And so
Thankfully, that story got a ton of attention at Rikers.
and then there's the stuff at the back end, which you're saying, Joanne, my bill has a lot to do with just when you seal somebody's record or expunge a juvenile's record, as we saw in the video in the beginning, you accelerate their economic potential and ability to contribute to our society in profound ways. And we know what works. There are reentry programs right now in New York, Goldman Sachs, and people are really experimenting with a great funding model of performance bonds, because we know that a small investment in an evidence-based program to reduce recidivism could save taxpayers multiples of their investment. So many obvious programs, but our history in all our crime bills has been more police, more jails, and hasn't been done the common sense that actually will make folks a lot safer. We experimented with those programs in Newark and had dramatic impacts in law and crime.
Mark, what are some of the things that can help with sort of the re-entry process that you all are advocating and supporting and promoting?
Well, one thing we did, which I don't know that we realized it when we did it, but it got a lot of attention, and it does have a profound impact, is ban the box unemployment applications. I don't know how many of you all are familiar with that, but a lot of companies have a box on their application that you have a conviction of a crime, if so explain. And a lot of that, those people probably don't get callbacks, let's put it that way. And so we made a decision a while ago for a lot of different reasons, one of which was that we find out when we interview people, we're interested in who they are now, not what they once did, what they once might have been like. Because really, people change, as Senator Booker said, 18 and 19-year-old, I know what I was like, now I'm 52. There's a lot of change that goes on. So ban the boxing is a big deal, because when people come out of prison, we talk about it, I mean, and we're talking about the least, that can afford to do this, the most disadvantaged. We over-prosecute them, they get over-sentenced, usually don't even have a lawyer that's any good. And then on the way out, they get overburdened with all these collateral consequences. They can't get, as Senator Booker mentioned earlier, you can't get a loan. You can't live with your family. If they're in public housing and you're coming back, you can't be in that family situation. Some of them can't go to schools to visit their kids, depending on the situation. And it goes on and on. So it's not any great surprise about the recidivism rates. So we need to unburden them. And we need to do things, in my opinion, ban the box, something private companies can do. And you hire the person based on the whole person. And then we need to alleviate some of these other burdens that we, the government, put on people on the way out across the board. And I think among those, Senator Booker and Senator Paul's DMAC is a good start. I think there should be much wider expungement of records, criminal records, particularly nonviolent offenders, particularly youthful offenders, drug offenders. I think that people should unprison the job of a prison. I worked in a prison. If they're not doing this, we need to change the model. They need to make the person better when they came out than when they were when they went in. And Shaka's story is so inspiring to me because he took it on himself. I mean, the odds were so stacked against him from the beginning. But we need to do that in prisons. And prisons that aren't performing that way, we need to get rid of everybody and stop funding them, because they get funded more and more because the recidivism rate's so high. And the metric that needs to be used, in my opinion, I'm in a business, need metrics, right? People coming out, are they coming back? That should product people, and if you're not making them better people, then we need a new warden, we need new cards, and you're going to get your funding cut. It's not working, so things like that.
Can I just interrupt for 2 seconds to ask you about private?
Right, all but, to me, public or private prisons judge it the same way. Are you making the person better? Are the programs better? We really, in Kansas where I live, we have a state prison near me. It's a big one, El Dorado. It's El Dorado everywhere else, but El Dorado is Kansas. I don't know why. It's Greenwich and Greenwich too. But anyway, it's a big prison, maximum security, and they have a really, really progressive reentry program. It starts 2 years before the individuals are ready to reenter society, and it's a holistic approach. Some of these people have been in solitary and segregation, and they start with it's problem solving, it's dispute resolution, it's to be a better father, husband, son, you name it. And then they pair them up with people in the community as a mentor. And then they get them a job when they're coming out. And thus far, it's 5 or 6 years in the making, it has single-digit recidivism rates right now.
Wow.
We need to do things like that, whether it's private or public, in my opinion.
Yeah, sorry, Cory, go ahead.
No, I was just going to point out, just highlight this point even more. So I get there and I start meeting with people in the Department of Justice and I ask that question. As I found out when I had to manage a city of 4,000 people, that if you're managing folks, you should pay very much attention to how you're measuring their performance, because that's what people are going to focus on, that's what people are going to care about. And I just ask a simple question. Are you measuring warden to warden in prisons about what their recidivism rates at their institutions are? And we're not measuring that whole scale. So if our society is about retribution and punishment, then we're doing a really good job of that. But if our society is about rehabilitation and redemption, then we have a long way to go, and it's doing the common sense stuff that Mark is talking about.
Just a couple sort of extraneous questions. Is there any move to get rid of solitary confinement? Is there any sort of public will to examine that whole process?
So my bill of Rand calls for the end of it for kids, except for very limited, very small periods of time. So juvenile solitary confinement, let's get rid of it.
That's for under 18, right?
So the age of original jurisdiction in our country is another thing that's really screwed up. It differs in many different states about when you're an adult or when you are a child. So our bill actually raises the age of original jurisdiction. If you can't, you're 18 years old, you can't drink. I don't think you can smoke marijuana in this state. There's all these things we say you can't do, but oh, by the way, if you're 16 or 17, you're responsible for your actions, and we're going to try you as an adult. So those things have to change in our country. Original jurisdiction should be raised. So yeah, for juvenile offenders, we say end of practice, and then I think we should be doing a push in this country to eliminate or significantly limit, is probably a better way of putting it, adult incarceration as well.
Do you think there's a public will, right, or political will right now? Because, it does seem it goes back to candidates not wanting to be perceived as soft on crime. So I think we heard in our previous panel that there was that period of time, a couple of decades ago, where people were extremely skeptical there was any solution to crime other than prison. So it was crime or prisons. So let's talk about sort of the political atmosphere now. Do you think it's right for some kind of change in policy, and especially with an election year? Let me ask you, Mark. So would Charles Koch, for example, support a candidate who? How important an issue is this as we approach the 2016 presidential election?
It's a huge issue. I'm not going to speak for Charles, but it is a huge issue to him. It's the main issue. It's that and ending corporate welfare, quite frankly, are his two main priorities. And this criminal justice reform is a big issue to us. We don't control what the candidates do, notwithstanding what some in the media and out there might think. Obviously, they're going to make their own decisions about what they think is important. But this is a big issue for us.
Have you approached the candidates? Have you talked to them? Or do you know any who might be receptive to some of these policies?
Well, if you look, I have not personally talked, I've talked to a couple, but it wasn't as part of it. It was before they declared the candidates working on these issues. But if you look on the Republican side, actually, Rand Paul is better than anybody, in my opinion, in both parties on these issues, quite frankly. So, yeah, I see he's very receptive. It's a main point that he always drives and emphasizes. And so we support that with him. Ted Cruz is strong on these issues. And then, there's others who talk about it as well. It's hard to know. And the reality is, we're not doing this from a political perspective. We are involved because there have been so many groups, so many different people, some in this room and elsewhere, have been working on these issues for decades. We've been working on it for 10, 12 years now, and it's been a big issue for Charles for a long time. But we're happy to be involved now because we think we can fill a need in the sense that we can give permission potentially to those that would be afraid, like, oh my God, we're going to be soft on crime if we do this, for them to support it. And it should be pretty simple for a lot of these people because they come from states where, as Senator Booker was pointing out, they've made the reforms we're talking about. I mean, you got Mississippi, you got Georgia, you got Texas, you got Oklahoma, Nebraska, South Dakota, you can go on and on. They're red states. And so I think the political will is changing. Someone mentioned inertia in the last panel. I think that's always an issue. Senator Booker will be able to speak to that more. But from our perspective, it's an issue that should happen. There was a great bill launched last week in the House of Representatives called the Safe Justice Act. by Representatives Sensenbrenner and Scott. It's comprehensive across the board, from the laws that are instituted and passed all the way through to reentry issues, and it covers the playing field. And there's other great bills out there too. So our hope is, and people like Senator Booker, we hope we could get across the goal line, pulling together these coalitions, because there's a lot of good we can do in these areas. It'll matter a lot. And then once that happens, maybe we can work on the other issues that are important, because the prison system has become the way station for all of our other woes in society that we don't deal with, whether it's mentally ill people, homelessness, whether it's education issues, lack of opportunities in
Trauma that Cory
addiction, exactly.
And you guys are funding a really amazing coalition. One of the funders of Center for American Progress, ACLU, you all.
Ford Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, the Arnolds. It's called the Coalition for Public Safety. And yeah, Center for American Progress. We have ACLU. We have American.
So you and the ACLU are all in this.
Yeah, we are all in. Yeah, no, this is huge.
Yeah, I think people should know that. It's an amazing coalition that's formed.
Yeah.
And what is that consortium doing, this coalition? What is your goal?
Trying to get people like him to do something. What we're doing is trying to just reach our various constituencies, our market segmentation, or whatever you want to call it, and meet with them and make them understand what a big issue this is for all of us, and how important it is for the people in their communities. And we're having different. We're going to have another seminar or something with elected officials in a couple of weeks. But it's really just raising awareness, getting messages out there, meeting with different politicians and groups, trying to build the coalition bigger. So hopefully, and I hope this year, something will happen in Congress.
Well, let's talk. That's a good next question, Cory. What's going on with the Redeem Act? And is this bill in the House? Does that duplicate what you guys are trying to do?
So I'm about a little over a year and a half in the Senate, and let me try to explain to you how this. I think the technical political science term is mishigas works. So the House and the Senate, they're both sort of crawling, creeping, scratching, pushing for bills on a lot of address different aspects of this. Depending on what passed, if they're sort of similar, they'll go into some kind of reconciliation, and then the president will sign it depending on if he believes it deserves his signature. To give a more global perspective, the president, one of the only meetings of its kind that I've seen in Washington in almost 2 years I've been there, called together the president, vice president, people from DOJ, called together about 15 senators and congresspeople of both parties to have this conversation about what can we get done and the urgencies that exist. And I left the White House sober because of the challenges, but also encouraged by what was creeping along. The reason why Mark and the Koch brothers and again it is so important is because there is still not, in my opinion, enough grassroots pressure to move the kind of reforms that we know work and to really get them through Congress. And this is not Democrats or Republicans. There are people on both parties that will resist lowering mandatory minimums. Folks who were part of the 1996 crime bill, folks who believe that these are important tools for us to use in the prosecution of criminals. So this is not easy, and especially when you know that when it comes to the Senate and the House, the power is concentrated in a few people's hands, the chair people of the Judiciary Committee, the Speaker, or the leader. And so we've got to figure out a strategy to get a good bill to the floor, out of through committee and onto the floor. And so there's a lot of wrangling going on that. It's by no means a done deal. I'm so happy that from Hillary Clinton's first policy speech to Ted Cruz is a partner of mine on a bill to reduce mandatory minimums called the Smarter Sentencing Act. But the reason why I'm out here in Aspen is because there are a lot of thoughtful, influential people here, and I'm telling you, Congress is going to move painfully slow, just like they've done on past issues from the civil rights movement to the suffrage movement, until this really becomes a major priority for Americans. It is a shame in our country, and we just need more people to be pushing Congress to do the right thing.
And so we only have about minutes remaining, so, you know, to that end, what can the average person do? Because I think people hear this conversation, they're really disturbed and troubled by the facts, and yet, you know, legislation moves painfully slow, and they may feel not particularly empowered to have to do anything about this. So what would you suggest?
There's a lot of things. I think first, call your representatives in Washington, the congressmen, congresswomen, senators. Let them know this is a priority for you. People in this room, I think they'll listen to them. We got to make it a priority. That's one thing. I think second, a lot of this is local. Most everything is. And we need the federal government to fix the system that was set up in the 20 or 30 years ago. And then let the communities figure this out. And I think a lot of things have to happen in the communities, between the local level, they can have big reforms. But I'm talking about just grassroots organizations, groups that help the disadvantaged. There's Youth Entrepreneurs of Kansas, which is a great organization in Kansas that teaches kids in public high schools skills in business, that type of thing, speaking skills. There's an organization that I must disclose, my wife is the president of the board. It's called Rise Up for Youth in Wichita, Kansas. It deals with at-risk youth in our public high schools. It's run by 2 ex-offenders who are amazing people. So things like that have to happen. Both make your elected officials know it matters. Try to reach out and help in your communities. If you're an employer, take a chance on someone coming out of prison. I mean, you know, the worst thing that can happen, I guess you have to fire them, I don't know, but just take a chance. Because we have, and we found that a lot of people are worthy of a second chance, and everybody is capable and worthy of redemption. We have to remember that.
I think there are an increasing number of nonprofits, too, that are involved with helping with the transition from prison to life. And so I think people can kind of seek those out. And the one thing about calling your senator, congressman, you know, I think you hear that and you're like, yeah, sure. That's not going to do anything. But I was interviewing Gabby Giffords and Mark Kelly because I'm doing a documentary on gun violence. And he said that every Monday when she would get back to Capitol Hill, she would say to her assistant, what are people calling about? What are people emailing about? You don't think that they pay attention. But Cory, you actually do, don't you? To what your constituents care about.
You know, you see the metrics when you come in, calls, emails. But please don't just think of Washington. Remember, the majority of our incarceration in this country is going on at the state level. You know these folks. Let them know. Educate yourself, and you will get more angry. For example, just put in Vera Institute jail. Find out what's going on in the jails in your town right now, in your communities. It is a trail of tears. And push to change these issues, but not only calling your state representatives, your state senators and the like, and your federal representatives, reaching out to them, but please also understand that there's things you could be doing right now to strike at the root of this problem. And I'll give one thing that I always say that just astonishes me, that we live in a country where I'm here today because this man that was my father, who was born poor, black, single mother in a segregated world, had all these people that went out of their way to show small acts of kindness to him that broke a cycle of poverty going back to slavery. The challenge we have in America right now, and the real poverty in this country that bothers me, is this poverty of compassion and action towards the kids that we have. And I'll tell you, for there to be a waiting list in America of tens of thousands of people, of kids, waiting for just to get a big brother or a big sister, 4 hours a week. That's all it takes. The amount of time we spend watching our favorite TV shows. And you want to lower the criminality of a kid with a big brother, the chance of being incarcerated goes dramatically down. Empowerment in schools. We have so much power as a people that we just aren't exercising. Alice Walker said the most common way we give up our power is not realizing that we have it in the first place. People are being caught up in the criminal justice system because the criminal justice system is broken. We arrest almost 1 out of 3 Americans now. Where between 70 and 100 million people are arrested. You don't need to be convicted of somebody. Once you get an arrest record, you're screwed in this country. Criminal justice is broken. We need to fix that. But we could always also starve that system completely by being there for our children, by helping them to avoid trauma. And as Frederick would say, and I'll conclude, it's easier to build strong children than to heal broken men.